Morning, everyone.
Good morning. My name is Donald Sapas. I'm the Town of Gilliland representative on the Pine Bush Commission, and in the absence of our chair, Gene Kelly, and our vice chair, Elaine Ball-Chinian, I, in my capacity as secretary, am going to facilitate this meeting. I'd like to begin with introductions. To my right, far right, is Citizen Representative Aaron Mayer, Executive Director Chris Hauver, TNC Representative Tony Wilkinson, Citizen Representative Steve Rice, Karen Terbush representing State Parks, Mike Lyons, Town of Colony, John Brust, Citizen Representative, Larry Eckhouse, Commission Counsel. Our first order of business is to consider the minutes of the March 21st, 2013 meeting. Those minutes have been distributed. Are there any comments, discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll make that motion, Tom.
Second. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Commission is always open to public comment at its meetings. If there is any member of the public in attendance who wishes to make comments, would you please so signify, identify yourself by name and address, and direct your comments to the commission. Okay, it appears there are no public comments at this morning's meeting. Next up would be reports. We would ordinarily begin with a report from the Commission Chair, Gene Kelly. I believe in his absence, Chris Hauver has a matter that he wishes to report on.
Sure, thanks, Don. Gene, who couldn't be here because of family obligations, wanted me to, just to let the board know, that some of you attended a tour at the landfill restoration site, the habitat restoration. That's part of the permit for the current landfill expansion. That was done for the technical committee commission members, and there were also members from the planning departments in Colony and Albany. I think anybody who was there can say that it was an impressive tour. Steve was there, Mike was there, Don was there. It's, as Neil has mentioned at every staff meeting, the update on the habitat restoration. It appears to be a resounding success thus far. And we expect that it will continue to be. And because of that, the Commissioner Joe Martens, is interested in seeing it himself, so we're working on setting up a tour for him in the near future. And there was just one other thing I wanted to mention about board appointments. At every meeting I mentioned board appointments for the citizen members. They are moving through the Senate. They may have voted last night, or they may be voting today. And Aaron Mayer, who's been a citizen member since 2002, June of 2002. That's pretty good.
Yeah, there you go.
What meeting number, Chris?
I don't remember. that I can't do. But Aaron's decided not to be considered for reappointment, primarily due to a lot of his other things he's involved with, specifically with Sierra Club. So I just wanted to say thank you for all your time.
Thank you.
Anything you'd like to say?
Well, like I say, it's been an honor to serve on this body and to be a resource to Chris. Again, I go back from when they were in your modest dwellings in Colony and watch this organization move from a local and regional resource to becoming a statewide and national resource. I've been in numerous conferences where work here has been cited at the conservation level, and it's just a tribute to say, you know, that I'm proud of this body and, as I said, a quality staff and professionalism and your leadership. As you know, I'm also a national director of the Sierra Club, so there's only so much time a state worker has during a year and day, and I just want to say it's been an honor for those moments that I've been here to serve with you, and as I say, to facilitate the mission of the preserve.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Okay, are there any commission members who have anything they would like to address this morning?
Don, don't know if this is the appropriate time to do it, but Chris, could you give us some insights into the front of the entranceway? Do we
Oh,
have more work
sure.
to do out there?
Yeah. We had met as a kind of a small ad hoc committee after one of the meetings to look at the frontscape, primarily the entranceway, because there was some concern about how it looked and not being necessarily as attractive as it could be to welcome people in, but also realizing the balance that we have to do because it is native habitat. So we worked with Fish and Wildlife and we've modified our permit so we actually will mow part of that, the entrance coming in, around the fence, around the sign. And we put that split rail fence in.
Yep.
So I think, Joel's back there, I think we're going to mow that soon, either.
Probably next week.
Probably next week. Good, okay. How's that for an answer?
That's great.
And we'll
They're
keep up-
mowing down further on 155 and it looks good. And you jumped on we had out at our
Audit committee.
budget meeting, we talked about some of the litter that's on 155 and some of the other roads that border the Pine Bush. And during the winter time when there's no snow, it is just, I think the litter is horrible. And so I expressed a concern to Chris about that. Right now, it looks great because it's so vegetated. But, you know, I do think it's something that needs to be addressed during the winter time, especially winter, spring. And I got an email from Chris that you jumped on call to Department of Corrections or Albany
Sheriff's
County
Office.
Sheriff, whatever, and they're going to help us out with that.
Yep. Yep.
That's great.
Yeah, and actually I'll give credit where that's due because Don Sapos recommended talking to the person who coordinates that, the inmate work crews, and I talked to Joel Hecht, our preserve steward, and Jesse Hoffman. Jesse Hoffman, our preserve steward, and Joel Hecht, our director of stewardship, who contacted them, and they're going to be coming out to start on that project.
That's great.
So,
They're an excellent resource, and I was amazed at how quick that they were able to hop on this.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it works out well, you can bring them back in the colder weather.
yeah,
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Good job.
thanks.
Don, I just wanted to mention one thing here.
Oh, yeah.
PBC, with its partners, Parks, and PNC, and Pine Bush Commission, and others, recently put out a watchable wildlife guide to sites around the state where you can view wildlife. And for the capital region here, Pine Bush is the featured site. And so these are going to be available for sale out here, as well as, I believe, Amazon and some other places you can get this. I'll just pass it around, take a look at it. There was a press conference a few
Look,
weeks back.
listen, I want to watch the assembly.
Great.
The best one.
It's a lovely Christmas present. It's not too early to be thinking of that.
Hey, stop that.
Okay. Next up will be, well, we've got several reports. Chris Halbert reporting as Executive Director, and Chris is also going to be covering the Technical Committee and the Discovery Center.
I think I'll keep my report short, but not due to any lack of important information. Remember, there's the update in your board packet from all the program areas, from all the things the staff, our seasonal staff, our interns, and our volunteers are all involved in. So I'd like you to make sure that you take a look at that. One thing that just came to mind, and I'll touch on some of these things for the Discovery Center report too, and I'll keep that brief. But Blake, can I ask you, yesterday at our staff meeting, you mentioned the education staff have been doing lots and lots of education programs with schools and then other groups. And you had a number from our last staff meeting, how many students we reached just here?
Just since the last staff meeting,
2 weeks.
It was over 654.
654 students in 2 weeks.
That's great.
So the education staff deserve a lot of credit for a lot of hard work. That's a lot of students, as I sit in my office in meetings like this. So thanks to the education staff. We only have 2 here, but you guys deserve a lot of credit.
Chris, I'd like to let the record reflect that Citizen Representative Harvey Alexander has joined the meeting.
Great, thank you.
Sorry I'm late.
That's okay.
Steve?
I'm just curious about the students. Are those students that come in groups, and then you have programs with them, and that's not just counting everyone who kind of attendance goes into the door? That's great.
That's exclusively just school programs that are coming.
That's great.
Yeah, so there's even more people coming through the door. Let's see. The technical committee report I can move to. That's okay with you, Don? Yes. So everybody should have a copy of the technical committee report that Margie puts together working with Neil. We only had, we had 3 projects that the technical committee met twice since the March commission meeting, and there were 3 projects. There was one in Gilderland, which was a minor subdivision on East Old State Road. It was basically it was 2 lots proposed on 1.2 acres. And as typical for a general recommendation, we recommended that as part of the subdivision, that no invasive species be used, promote the use of native plants, and specifically, if you're going to use any commercial lighting, that it be sodium vapor lighting. In Albany, there was one on Rapp Road. It was an additional 2,700 square foot addition to an existing structure that has very little impact, actually no impact on our work, and the recommendation was the same. And then finally, Crossgates Commons. Those of you who travel Washington Avenue Extension, when you come to the traffic light at Crossgates Commons, where Walmart and Home Depot are, there's on the western side of that traffic light, there's an area of some trees, some taller trees and some vegetation. There's a proposal to put a drive-through restaurant there. And again, the same recommendations were there, but because of the excavation that would probably happen, and it is not an area recommended for protection, but because of the excavation that's recommended, or the excavation that is likely, we recommended that they donate any sand that's excavated to the commission for habitat restoration. And I think that's it. I mentioned the habitat restoration project with the landfill, the tour that we had. Neil goes to meetings weekly with the city staff, DEC, and the 2 consultants from Clough Harbor and Applied Ecological Associates. Does anybody have any questions for the technical committee report?
Discovery Center, Chris?
I'll do the Discovery Center. Back in May 18th, we had our 7th annual Lupin Festival. We had nearly 600 people. We had, the whole focus was on history of the pine bush. I would say it was a resounding success, but I'll say that for every Lupin Fest because they always turn out pretty well, even if you don't have good weather. So we had a number of people here, a number of different groups. And it was nice. It was a nice weather. We had Save the Pine Bush. It's the first time Save the Pine Bush was here. They had a table. So it was a nice opportunity to work with them too, along with the Friends group. You may have recognized, kind of going on the entranceway, John, along the front of this building, the landscaping that has been done. If you haven't noticed it, look at it on your way out. There's mulch along there. It's all been replanted with native shrubs, tall shrubs, small shrubs, and herbaceous plants. And the idea of that, which it has always been since we opened, but we never really focused on it, is to have that look like more of a manicured landscape with native plants. So it's less wild looking, but they're native plants in a more manicured way. Thank you. That's a rough one. So take a look at it. It looks good, and probably by the fall we'll see some blooms, and in the next couple of years it'll really look nice. And Sandy Walk, who's probably the only person who is skilled in native landscaping in our area, helped us out with that a lot. Actually, she designed it and installed it and worked with our staff and volunteers, so it looks good.
Perhaps some photography or maybe even a little video of that process on the commission website?
Yeah. Actually, we talked about putting it up on Facebook, didn't we, Wendy? Yeah, so Facebook's we get a lot of, Facebook's a good vehicle for us for programs and just getting the word out to people. Believe it or not, Facebook does have value.
Convince me.
Yeah.
The initial comment here about Memorial Day weekend and getting attendance 65% over last year and 75%.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. When we talked years ago about this building and the big investment that would have to be made in this building and the big investment outside in the exhibit section, and the whole question I recall was how do we get people to come back for the second visit?
Right.
We can grab people for the first one, but what do we do about the second one? And obviously people are coming back repetitively. That's fantastic.
Right, they're coming back, and that was, we recognized that even going back to our working group.
Yeah.
And the way to bring them back is to continue to offer new programs or programs that are new to the people. And even in the Carner classroom, we've met in there sometimes.
Yeah.
We have a rotating exhibit, which is sometimes quarterly, sometimes every 3 times a year, which I guess is quarterly. Right?
No.
No, quarterly's 4 times a year. This is what happens when you guys make me report on everything. All right.
You're environmental science, not arithmetic.
Remember, plant ecologist. That's the background here. So 3 or 4 times a year we have a rotating exhibit, and that brings people back in too. And things like the Lupin Festival or Smoky Bear Day that we do on Columbus Day. That's what it keeps bringing people back, and that's what we've got to do. One final thing about the Discovery Center is, those of you who remember, we had an event recognizing Meg Stewart, who was on our board for a long time, and there's a plaque with a frog outside right at the beginning of the Discovery Trail. That Discovery Trail now has FlexiPave on it. FlexiPave is that material that are in between the planters, so it's recycled tires with aggregate. So if you're interested, when you leave today, take a look out in the back there, and then you can look at the landscape on the way through. And that's it.
Okay. Next up is the financial report. I'd like to turn it over to Finance Director Lisa Anthony.
Good morning. First statement in our financial packet would be the statement of financial activities, and this is a snapshot just for 1 month this fiscal year, the snapshot for April. We'll begin with revenues. Our revenues, dues, and contributions are slightly higher than budget, just to an increase of public donations. Government grants is on budget for the month of April. And mitigation fees and investment income are both zero against a zero budget for the month of April. Lease revenue is slightly higher than budget, and this is due to rental income from our seasonal staff at our parents' house. And other revenue is higher than budget, and this is just due to an increase of our program fees and our merchandise sales. So our total revenue came in on budget for the month of April, very close. Moving on to expenses. Personnel and fringe are slightly over budget for the month of April, and this is just due to large benefit payments throughout the year, and this will catch up over time, just depending on our expenditures versus the budget. Training and travel are under budget, again, due to the timing of just trainings and meetings versus when we budget them throughout the year. Contractual is over budget, and this is due to a completion of a large restoration project in April. And this will fluctuate too throughout the year, depending on the budget and depending on the weather, and we can get out there and do things. So our communications, occupation, supplies, and equipment, both 3 categories are under budget due to the timing of advertising and event expenses. In communication, occupation is under budget due to the timing of utility payments in the Discovery Center. And supplies and equipment are under based on conservative spending at the beginning of the year. And we wait to receive our cash plan, which is I think pretty close to coming in. So hopefully, yeah. Other expenses are $7,000 over budget, and this is due to the timing of large insurance payment for our quarterly insurance, which is actually budgeted in May, but we paid it in April. So overall, both our revenue came in on budget, giving us our NOI budgeted for the month of April. Does anybody have any questions on that? Moving on to the statement of net assets. Looking at our assets, our operating cash increased quite a bit, and this was due to a large advance payment from DEC for the whole quarter. So we received an advance payment through June. Conservation and land reserves remained unchanged. federal grant funds were responsible for the increase, or for the grants receivable, $3,000. That's our NFP money. Accounts receivable, this is money owed for quarterly mitigation, and this was paid in May. Inventory remained the same for the month of April. Prepaid expenses decreased due to the timing of year-end expenditures. Investments had a positive performance in all three accounts through April at approximately $31,000. Our capital assets remained unchanged for April, so our total assets increased $345,000, and this is due to both an increase in cash and investments with them. Moving on to liabilities, accounts payable and accrued expenses remained the same. Deferred revenue increased, and this is due to the advance payment from DEC for May and June. Total liabilities increased due to the advance for our grant funding. Moving on to net assets, investment and capital assets remained the same. Reserved assets remained unchanged, and unreserved increased slightly, and this was due to an increase in our investment income and our net operating income. So overall, total net assets increased slightly. Any questions on this? Alrighty. The final report in our packet is our investment summary. The reserve fund is doing well with a slight gain of 0.77% for the month of April. And both our Discovery Center endowment and our endowment have a positive performance through the month of April at 1.32% and 0.92% gain for the month. So overall, our investments had a positive performance with a gain of approximately $31,000. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. I do have one.
Yeah.
It has to do with
The balance sheet.
Well, it's the, clearly the revenue from the dump that we're getting here. I guess I wonder, when do we start planning for the possible loss of that revenue? Is it 2015 is when the dump is expected to close?
2022.
What's that? Oh, okay.
2022. I would say 2022 is 9 years away, right?
Okay.
So I would say within the next 5 years, we start to plan for it. Specifically, and within that time frame, we're going to have to consider a new management plan, because the current management plan is 2010. So we have to consider a management plan in 2015, whether or not we need to update it or not. And the staff internally are already starting to talk about what changes might be needed for that, and that's the appropriate time to really look at that, because there's an operations section in it. And the operations section is always kind of it's hard to look ahead, not knowing what state funding might be, but this is something specific we should get into.
Chris, there will always be, will there always be a transfer station there?
My expectation is there will always be a transfer station there. There will always be work the city's going to be responsible for the maintenance of that landfill for at least 30 years after closure, once it's capped and closed. So if the operating landfill goes through 2022, the cap and closure process is probably several more years, and that the impacts will continue to occur on the preserve and preserve users. So that's something we should keep in mind too. John has brought this up before, and it's probably important for people to know. Last year was the first year that we got our full appropriation. Our appropriation has been steady at $2 million from the Environmental Protection Fund for almost 7 years now. But last year was the first time in almost 5 years that we got the full appropriation. We were cut 25%. We were only getting 1.5. So we were down 500,000. And like I've said before, we can survive on that. Is that ideal? No. We get a lot more conservation work done and education work done with that funding. But I have some ideas. I've been thinking about it.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is, under the heading Presentation and Discussion Topics, is the audit, the external audit for the fiscal year that ended on March 31st. And in that connection, I'd like to ask Matt Lindeman from Majeski & Company, our engagement partner, to address the group relative to the audit report for the fiscal year ending on March 31st.
And just before you, members, you should all have two documents in front of you, the stapled handout and then the bound handout that Matt will go through. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to start with the stapled handout, which is the report to the Board of Directors. Just tell you a little bit, we actually have two reports that are a byproduct of our audit. I'm not going to read them to you line by line, but I'll just tell you what's in them, and we'll hit the high points. Certainly, if there's any questions, you can stop me. We conducted the audit as of March 31st, 2013, so that was our point in time. We audited those balances and all the activity within the fiscal year of the commission. We were out here in May, early May 6th, the week of May 6th, to do the audit, working with both Chris and Lisa and her staff. We issued draft reports on the 10th of June. They went to Lisa and Chris to look at, and then we had a full presentation to the Finance Committee on June 14th, last Friday. So these reports have already been seen and kind of vetted by both management and the Audit Committee. In the stapled handout, this is a required communication under professional auditing standards. A couple things that you should know. First of all, we had to adopt we conduct this audit in accordance with not only generally accepted auditing standards, but also governmental auditing standards, as the Commission is a public authority. So in that regard, there were a couple new pronouncements by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, and we did adopt those standards into the financial statements of the Commission this year. And they basically had to do with really presentation more than, not really a lot of substantive change in accounting, but really more presentation. So in the previous year, where we used to call things net assets, it's now called the net position. So a lot of it is really more semantics. But we are required to inform you that we did adopt those standards this year. I think probably for the most part, the things that are most important from the board's perspective, did we have any difficulties in encountering the audit, which is on page 2? No, we didn't. We were able to get all our information from Lisa and from Chris, all our questions answered. There was adequate documentation to support all our inquiries, and when we corroborate some of the statements and representations that management makes, there was always the documentation, confirmation from third parties, etc., to back that up. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements, which is the second header on page 2 of that report. Again, I think it's important that you understand that we didn't make any material audit adjustments as a result of performing our audit. So in layman's terms, we kind of left the books unchanged when we came in. So the information that you're getting at your regular meetings from Lisa, as she just went through her report, you can, and this has been the case the previous years that we've been auditing as well, we haven't had to really make any substantial adjustments to the financial statements. So the information that you're getting at your regular meetings is accurate. And at the end of the year, when we look at it, we've kind of come in and blessed it. Disagreements with management, we didn't have any disagreements during the course of our audit in terms of accounting policies or how to treat something or record something. And we didn't have any other findings or issues related to our audit. So that's the stapled report. There's no questions. I'll move on to the financial statements. As I said before, I'm gonna skip around here a little bit and really tell you more of what's in it and just hit a couple of the highlights. I'm gonna jump right to pages 5, 6, and 7, which is actually our report, Wojcicki and Company's report. The rest of this packet really belongs to the Commission because it's the Commission's financial statements. It's really management's responsibility for preparing the financial statements. It's our responsibility to come in here and make sure that they are materially correct. So management's responsibility. Our responsibility is delineated on page 5. The most important thing is on page 6, which is our opinion. Okay, so we come in, we do our audit, and then we have to put an opinion on the financial statements. Are they correct? Are they materially correct, etc.? Which we did. The opinion was an unqualified or an unmodified opinion, or in layman's terms, it's a clean opinion. It's what you want, and it's the same type of opinion that the commission has had ever since our involvement as well. So you have a clean opinion on your financial statements. And basically what we're saying is we audited the numbers, and they are correct in all material respects. Like I said, I'm going to jump around a little bit. On page 7, we do make reference to, because you are a public authority and we're doing the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, we also have to issue a report which addresses internal control, and it also addresses compliance with laws and regulations, including the New York State investment guidelines, because the commission does have a substantial investment portfolio. We make reference on page 7 to our actual report, which sits back on, I think it's pages 15 and 16, excuse me, 18 and 19. And again, without going through that report in detail, I will tell you that there was nothing, as we perform those tests, there was nothing that we are required to report to you, no instances of non-compliance or anything of that nature. So I guess, again, for lack of a better term, those were clean reports as well. On pages, apologize for skipping around here, but we're just following the prescribed format. Pages 8 and 9 are the actual numbers that we audited, I think. Page 8 is the statement of net position. This is the statement that used to be called the statement of net assets. And this really shows all of the assets and all of the liabilities of the commission. I know Lisa, in her presentation, she talks kind of on a month-to-month basis. This is a snapshot as of March 31st. These are the numbers that we audited. So as you can see, the commission had total assets of almost $10 million as of March 31st, consisting almost 50% of that is in cash and investments at this point. There's very few liabilities. Those are just normal bills that have come in after the end of the year that weren't paid by the end of the year, which leaves your net position at about $9.8 million. So I think the easiest way to understand that number is if you were able to take all of your assets, including the building, and converted all to cash, and then you paid off all your debts, what would you have left? That's $9.8 million, basically, at the end of the year. So that's the statement in net position, or in the private sector, you might refer to that as the balance sheet. On page 9 is a statement of revenues and expenses. Like Lisa just went through the most recent month, went through April. This is the entire year on this page. And as Chris had just mentioned in his one of your reports that you just did, I can't remember which one now because we did several, but the DEC funding this year was up to $2 million in the last fiscal year. So the government grant revenue was much higher, and also because of the performance of the investment portfolio, the net assets, the income generated from the investments was about little more than $200,000 more than it was in the previous year over year. So there was a substantial increase in revenue for the commission during our most recent fiscal year. The bottom line, or the change in net position, which is the third line from the bottom, was a positive $355,000. So year over year, you generated in revenues $355,000 more than what you spent. Okay. Any questions on those two statements? Okay. The rest of the report following, until you get to that government report, is really just the footnotes to the financial statements, which provide a little bit more information on some of the numbers I just talked about. And then the only other thing I'll just mention real brief, if you didn't have a chance to look at the financial statements. Before you got in here, I know that the packets were on your desk. I don't know how far in advance you may have got them. There is what's called a management's discussion and analysis on page 4, pages 1 through 4. And to be quite honest with you, even though I just made you suffer through that presentation, these are kind of the cliff notes to the year. And that's actually prepared by management, but we obviously verify. She takes the numbers that we've audited in order to develop that kind of analysis. And I think right on page 1, I've already touched on a couple of these things, but some of the financial highlights, your total assets are about $350,000 higher than last year. We talked about that change in net position, how you had higher revenues during the year versus your expenses. And then the unrestricted net position, which doesn't contemplate the value of the building and all, is about $5.2 million at the end of the year. That's money that's just available for general use. I think that's it. So unless there's any other questions, that's the financial statement, clean opinion. One thing I'll mention before I stop is in the past we've also had a third letter, which is a management letter where we've made some comments and recommendations regarding internal controls and things of that nature. It was not necessary for us to issue such a letter this year. In the past we had made some comments and management's always responded to the comments, the audit committee's always gotten involved, and they've taken the comments and recommendations we made and implemented those changes. So it was a couple pages, I think, a few years ago when we first got in here, and little by little, all of those items that we've come up with have been addressed. Not that there's nothing new that could ever come up, but we didn't have need to issue that kind of management letter this year. So I think that's a testament to the management and staff here. That's it.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks,
We'll
Matt.
see you next year.
Okay.
I'll give you a bit of editorial from somebody who spent a lot of his working career as a bank examiner. Awareness of what's in these, and understanding and sensitivity to content is an important element in the exercise of fiduciary responsibility among commission members. We are the governing body, and this is a nice report. And the fact that we got no management letter, kudos to Chris and Lisa. Shall we move on to action items?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. We have a series of 5 action items for consideration at this morning's meeting, and I'm going to put Chris on the spot for explanation of them. The first is to consider a Discovery Center committee and appointments. Chris will explain the thinking, the logic, and the appointments.
Great, thanks, Don. So in your packet, action item A is blue. And this is the creation of Discovery Center Committee or proposal, and it's being proposed by Gene as board chair, even though he's not here. And it's based on, and they're proposed under a certain section of the bylaws, as it says here. The idea to create this committee is, it kind of folds into a process that we're moving into with the staff. With Jeff Fulmer, our new Discovery Center director, not so new anymore, he's been here almost a year and a half, and the staff that work on the Discovery Center, within the Discovery Center, part of the education team. We've been open for 6 years now, 6 years this month. And unlike most of the other program areas that we work in the preserve, we don't have a very specific, almost strategic vision or plan for how we move ahead. So for example, and I use this example even in our audit committee when this first came up. So for invasive species management, we have an invasive species management plan as one of the appendices in the management plan, and it gets into the level of detail of the type of species, the type of what season of the year, and what type of chemical or mechanical treatment you could use to control that species, that level of detail. We don't have that for the Discovery Center. We don't have our vision for how many people do we want in the door? How many people is enough? How many people is too many? What is our capacity? What's our capacity with our current staff? Do we need to grow? Are we fine the way we are? there's certain things that are restrictive. The size of the building, we're not going to build on, we're not going to expand the building as it sits now. We have a parking lot that's restricted, ever. We're going up, Don. We're going to a third floor. So we're,
Hey, Chris, the Pepsi building, I can see it right now.
but there are, seriously, so, and one of the biggest restrictions that we have is the parking lot. Parking lot has 98 spaces. And we have tenants, so we have to provide parking for tenants. We have to provide parking for staff, for meetings. So there's certain restrictions that need to be brought into, this whole idea of working on a strategic vision. I don't want to call it a plan. It's a 5-year strategic vision for the Discovery Center. And looking at different things like room rentals. If we're renting a room for a group of the Association of Planners of the Capital District, how does that further our mission? Are they learning about the Pine Bush, the Discovery Center? If we do a birthday party, are those children learning about the Discovery Center, the Pine Bush, why it's important? I mean, all that has to be kind of wrapped into a nice, succinct document. So the idea is put this committee together, and then work with our staff, our Education Discovery Center staff, all the staff in the beginning, to get some ideas, kind of the way we did with our working group for the interpretive plan. Have a consultant, bring a consultant in based on an RFP. We put out an RFP or an RFQ, probably in the early fall. Bring in a consultant to facilitate the process and give us a final product. So Gene's recommendation to me was we should have a committee for the Discovery Center. At this point, it's ad hoc. It may be made permanent, but that would consist of Steve Rice as chair, Harvey Alexander. So we have 2 of our educators, John Brust, who's our treasurer, and Don Sapos, who's our secretary, because they both expressed interest on it. And of course, committees are open to anybody, but this committee would work specifically on this project. Yeah.
In terms of time, the time frame.
Yep.
When are you thinking that such a vision might be?
Well, I don't know, because if we do this, if we get an RFP produced this summer, we work on it, get it out, say in September, late September, maybe we could start the process in November. Is it a 6-month process? I'm not sure. That's kind of my thought. I guess I don't want to prematurely guess how long. I wouldn't want to cut it short, but I don't want it to drag on for 3 years either.
You want to target something.
Yeah, we got to target. Once we get an RFP out there, I think we'll know. And I think we could turn it around pretty quickly. I thought you were going to ask me, you didn't know you were a chair. Did anybody have questions on that? All right. I mean, now's the time to do it. I mean, we're like Blake mentioned, we're hitting all kinds of school groups. We're getting more foot traffic in. John mentioned the increase in public coming here on Memorial Day. So things are increasing, things are going well. So now's the time to come up with your, even a more detailed plan. You don't wait until things start to decline, in my opinion. So,
Chris, would this plan ultimately be an appendix to the management plan?
yeah, I would incorporate it as an appendix. I mean, at this point, it can be a standalone, and then we'd
Sure.
bring it right in. Yep. Okay.
Need a motion?
Yes, we do.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
Second for Mike. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, now on to government work.
So now let's get into the exciting stuff. So action item B on the lavender sheet is a FOIL policy. The commission has followed FOIL, the Freedom of Information Law, always, but we've never had a written policy. So this is we're proposing creating a written policy, and it's based on the Public Officers Law. So council and myself worked on this, and council, of course, tweaked it a bit. And what you have in front of you is a proposed FOIL policy. So you have a FOIL officer, not identified, but I serve in that capacity. And there's a FOIL appeals officer, and that would be the board chair. And the board chair would make the determination if there were an appeal, and there has been in the past, whether or not to make the decision on their own or to bring in the executive committee. And that's it. Anyone have any questions on it? Any comments from council? Larry?
No, I think FOIL policies, some FOIL policies go on for many pages, and we decided to try to keep this one brief.
Yeah.
And as clear as we could, without getting into a lot of detail, which is already in the statute. So this, I think this is codifies everything that the commission's been doing and the way it's been doing it, and it's consistent with the public officers law.
So we're not going to change anything in terms of our procedure?
There's nothing really in terms of procedure that's being changed, but this will be a policy that will be written and it will be on the...
It'll be on the website, because we follow FOIL, and it's a given. We have to follow FOIL as a
Right.
public entity. But, if you're a member of the public, I mean, today, if you're looking for information, you'd go on the website, you look, what's their FOIL policy? How do I direct my inquiry? So now we'll have that, and we'll post this once it's approved.
Okay, there being no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion for
So
approval.
Move.
Karen? Second. Karen? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Gene would be disappointed. I'm not referencing these action items by color. What the heck is this, Chris?
Margie?
Salmon.
Is that salmon? No, that's
Oh,
salmon.
oh, that's-
That's magenta.
Oh, okay. Really?
Action
Well,
item,
Chris took my
action
class
item
on
C, the
Hot pink.
magenta,
Hot pink.
hot pink?
Hot pink.
Hot pink item.
That's Matt Lindeman all the way.
A multi-year contract to continue our relationship with Wojcicki and Company. Chris, comments?
I can explain some background, and John is treasurer if you want to,
Yep.
talk about how the audit committee looked at this. So the commission's procurement guidelines allow for single source procurement, which means not going out to bid if it's justified. And there's very specific means of justification to do that. And that justification is past experience with a particular issue, familiarity with specific agency operations, experience with similar projects at other agencies or levels of government, and the basis upon which the commission determined the cost to be reasonable. So I drafted a memo based on Larry, our counsel. He looked into the state finance law and our procurement guidelines here that we have adopted, wrote an opinion, and I plagiarized that opinion and put it into a memo, more or less. And that memo is what follows action item C, and it justifies, it meets those criteria. When we did bid it 5 years ago, Wojcicki was by far the lowest bidder. And the audit committee, I would say they're pleased with the process. I can say is for staff, for Lisa and I, they're very efficient. They're good people to work with. They ask a lot of questions, but they're thorough. I think they do a good job from a management standpoint. And from the audit committee, who really needs to make this recommendation. What would you say?
I know I've been very pleased with working with Matt and the folks at Wojcicki. That is balanced by the fact that, as Don mentioned, we have a fiduciary responsibility. It'd be easy to sit back and sort of watch the traffic go by and not really get involved. And if you like him and he seems like a pretty flexible person and he works well with Lisa and Chris, all that sounds good. That's balanced with the fact that we are talking about an auditing function here. One of the concerns that I expressed was, they've been on board for 5 years. They're going to be on. Our recommendation is they'd be on board for another 5 years. I have a mild concern about all that continuity when we're talking about auditing. And then Larry brought up that this isn't the only audit that's being performed on the Albany Pine Bush books. Fortunately or unfortunately, there's 3 or 4 others.
We were just contacted this week for a workers' comp audit in 2 weeks.
We had 5 audits last year.
So
We had 5 last year.
We have 5 other audits on these books. And the guys from Wojcicki, my opinion, that they're very thorough, they're extremely professional, their pricing was good. There is a procedure in place where the principal in charge of the auditing within Wojcicki has to change for the next 5 years. And they've been Lisa speaks to their continued, frequent, as-needed assistance to us, to her, as she's going forward in her job. So you balance all that out, and it really seems like the right thing to do to bring them on for another 5 years. And anyway, that's my recommendation.
Yeah.
That'd be very pleasing.
So adjusting with inflation, I'm assuming it's similar.
Yeah, we're still under where we would be with anybody else.
Yep.
And then there's that retraining
Yeah.
aspect and the cost of, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it really seems that when you balance that all out, this isn't a close decision. I mean, we all, you know, everybody on the budget committee said, yeah, this makes complete sense, let's bring them on, let's keep them.
And I can answer that cost, Harvey, and I put it right in the memo. So this year, they were at $13,500. So their proposal is for next year, $14,000, but for the next 3 years, $14,000 for years 1, 2, and 3. Then they go up to $14,500 and then $15,000. So that's pretty reasonable.
It's anecdotal, but I'm involved with two not-for-profits that are smaller in size financially than the commission, and we're paying comparable fees for audit services. Matter of fact, the next time we go out for RFP on both of them, I'm going to ask Wojcicki for a bid.
Now, and the 4 other audits that are done, those are not done by Wojcicki.
No.
No, yeah, if I meant, yeah,
No,
if
that
I wasn't
was-
clear on that, by other agencies, other entities.
Right.
And they're all coming out the same way, that Lisa and Chris are doing a good job, the books are in order.
It was the Department of Labor, the Comptroller's Office, the Insurance Rating Board, and Workers' Compensation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Additional discussion? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, John, Mike, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. I'm going to go with Apricot. Action item D, public authority compliance documentation.
Okay. This is, we have to do this, you will see this every June as part of our reporting to Paris. Paris is the acronym for the Public Authorities Reporting Information System, which is an online reporting system. We upload, Lisa and I work on and upload 4 reports, and they're due by June 30th to the Authorities Budget Office and the Comptroller's Office. And these 3 items need to be approved by the board. And all 3 will be uploaded to our website. And we need to do this as part of that reporting. The first one is the assessment of internal controls. Matt mentioned that. I think he mentioned it was on page 18 in the actual audit document. But we need to produce an actual statement of our own. So that's what the first document that follows action item D is the assessment of internal controls dated today, and it certifies that we did follow our internal controls and had no issues. The second one that follows is the prompt policy report for 2012-13, and that certifies that we followed our prompt payment policy during the fiscal year, which means that we paid a bill. If we had a bill that came in, we paid it within 30 days. And that's pursuant to the Public Officers Law. And then finally, this is what Paris reporting looks like. If you're curious, this is the Paris annual report, the financial summary. We have to produce this first, get board approval, and then we do it, or we add it to the actual annual report. This is it's just a summary of all the financials that you've seen for a year, and that's it.
Is this the one that they prepared or Lisa prepared?
Lisa prepares it.
I prefer that based on the financials.
Okay.
It's all the same numbers, it's just a little bit different format based on the definitions in Paris.
Right. The numbers are the same, but the way it's laid out is going to look different because Paris, the things that they ask for are different. So it's actually another budget that has to be produced internally. Thank goodness for Lisa. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Okay. If not, entertain a motion on action item D.
So moved.
Aaron,
Second.
second from Harvey. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're going to salmon.
Salmon.
I'm thinking Chinook.
Chinook salmon. Excellent.
Wild caught.
Here are those farm-fed.
No farm raised. Project Sunlight policy. All the joy.
Project Sunlight. Project Sunlight is a policy that has been that comes out of both, I believe, the executive and legislative branches. It's being promoted by the Cuomo administration. Project Sunlight is a means of promoting continued additional transparency between public agencies and vendors, more or less. And there's very specific categories that require reporting. Primarily for us, and Larry and I worked on this together, and he came up with a nice summary of what we're responsible for. There's two of the categories that we would be responsible for would be, and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, rulemaking, which we're probably not going to produce any more rules because we have our own rules and regs now, but procurement, so purchases. So purchases we are subject to that. So we have to, under the requirements of this law, we have to adopt a policy. And that policy follows the action item document, and it's verbatim of that which is used by SUNY, CUNY, DEC, and it was prepared by the state, and they basically just adopted the same one. So I propose that we do the same. I came up with a Project Sunlight reporting form. So that's a way we would track things internally. So when the commission is subject to Project Sunlight through some action, we document it with this page. And the other requirements of the law I put into this resolution. And that, in summary, what it does is it appoints the executive director as the Project Sunlight liaison, because none of our other staff, because they don't make decisions specifically for procurement, only I do. I'm the one who's subject to Project Sunlight. So if I were to work with a vendor, if a vendor were to come in and meet with me, solicited or unsolicited, if somebody stopped in off the street and said the Discovery Center should have a new roof, I would have to report that in a database that's managed by OGS. But I came up with this because I thought we would be able to track it internally. So if anybody FOILed or requested information, we would have something to show them.
So that's something you fill out anytime somebody asks for information?
No, only if you want to sell me something. Only if you want to sell the commission something. This will happen rarely, I would guess. It also included any phone conversations. They have now changed the law, so any phone conversations that were subject to this are no longer. So if you called me and said the commission should consider a new roof for the Discovery Center, that's not reportable anymore.
Don't forget the NSA has it.
Say it again.
I said the NSA has it.
Yes, they have it. So this is, you would appoint me as a Project Sunlight liaison. It defines that I have taken the appropriate training on a specific date, which is required, that I have to report within 5 business days to this OGS database. We'll maintain a publicly available list, which is why I thought we'd use this reporting form. And then finally, if the Sunlight Project Sunlight Liaison, or anybody else who would be subject to compliance, which would be board members, but board members aren't involved in procurement, you're subject to disciplinary action. So, since I wrote it, I'll make sure that I report within 5 days. And that's the summary of projects. So, I think we put it together. I mean, it sounds very complicated. It is complicated, but I think working with Larry, we came up with a good way to address it all.
Yeah, there are exceptions to certain contacts. The list indicates, what kind of contact, when, from whom, and so on. And if there are contacts with, Chris is the liaison, so he has the reporting responsibility, but if someone approaches another staff member, that staff member should notify Chris. And the form will be helpful, so that can be filled out, given to Chris, and then he reports it. There's a database online for reporting that, which is operable.
I looked into it last week, and I'm waiting to hear.
Yeah. So once it's operable, anyone can go in there and look and see who's been contacting whom about what, within the parameters. And it's supposed to encourage integrity. I don't think it involves the legislature.
We also have a lobbying policy, that's on our website, and that's similar to this. So if somebody approaches the staff to try and influence, I'll give you an example. If Joel sends out an RFP and he puts something in the contract reporter for some habitat restoration work, and he has a person come to him, say, I'd like to know what the bids are for this because I'm going to underbid it, that has to be reported. That's reportable under the lobbying law. So we have that as well. Any questions on Project Sunlight?
If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the Project Sunlight policy as presented.
So moved.
Aaron and Steve. Thank you.
Thanks.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Project Sunlight, let it shine. Thank you.
Now we need a motion to,
Yes, we have something to consider in executive session at our meeting this morning. So I'll entertain a motion that we switch over to executive session at this time. Karen?
Second.
Second from Harvey. In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. We're going to go into executive session.